Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Vega Talks number 8. Today, our discussion will focus on coaching, making the right choices. So welcome to Vega Talks. This is our structure for today. First, my introduction. I'm Narieta Pretorius. I'm a thinking facilitator, and I'm also the campus navigator here at Vega School in Durban. These are my social media handles if you want to have a bit of a follow and have a look at my profile. But let's focus on what can you expect from today. Firstly, thank you for all the participants that have joined in on the discussion today. I really look forward to today, and I will soon introduce our speakers to you. So what to expect? We're going to have a quick introduction to our speakers. We will then have a discussion. Today's Vega Talks is very much focused on answering questions that we put forward to our panel members. And then responding to it. And then we'll end it with asking you to ask your questions. So those that are participating today, you would then have the opportunity to ask your questions. And if you would like to share anything during the discussion on social media, you can use the hashtag Vega Virtual Talks and then the @Vega School official tag. So welcome. I'm really looking forward to the discussion today. Before I introduce all the speakers, just a quick introduction to our partner. Greg Day, who is the editor of KZN Invest. We conceptualized and started Vega Talks with, we start everything with a good coffee. And then Greg produces articles for KZN Invest on the discussions that we have for Vega Talks. Right, so today, making the right choices. So I would assume your reason for joining today is that you've got an interest in the world of coaching, be that because you are yourself maybe a team lead, or you are in a position yourself where you may be curious about coaching and how to do it either in your position or for your organization or maybe for yourself. So let's quickly introduce our speakers. I'll start with Zarina. Zarina Murad is an accredited meta coach, coaching leadership in teams and culture, strategic planning, action plans, and best practices in various public and private organizations, SMEs and NGOs in Mauritius and South Africa, and currently Zarina is dialing in all the way from Mauritius. Zarina, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, Narieta. Thank you.
Fantastic. Always happy to discuss things with you, Zarina, and pick your brain. Welcome. Next up, we have Richard Grossi. Richard is a life influencer and registered ICF ontological coach, public speaker, author, and lecturer. He's got experience in strategic planning in the advertising and corporate fields with a focus on people as influential brands. Richard, welcome to the discussion. Okay, next up, we have Karen Lowe. Karen is a perception coach and keynote speaker focusing on personal development, well-being and diversity, and inclusion management, as well as strategic PR and business consulting. Karen, welcome to the discussion.
Hi, good morning, everybody. It's really nice to be joining today's session, and thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Karen. And Karen is dialing all the way in from Cape Town, and then Richard and myself, we are based here in Durban. All right, let's get into the discussion. So I've got one question that I'm going to ask each of the panel members. And Zarina, I'm going to start with you. What kind of coaching do you do? And then what is your approach to coaching?
Thank you very much for that question, Narieta. The kind of coaching that I do is based on meta coaching, which has its roots in neuro-linguistic programming and neurosemantics. So it's quite a rigorous integration of those two dimensions into a cutting-edge coaching psychology. My approach to coaching is very much supporting and challenging my client. It really is about thinking about your thinking. And if you think about human beings, we are made up basically of 4 aspects. We have our thinking aspect, we've got our emoting aspect, we've got then our external aspects which show up in our behavior and languaging. And so these are the only things that we can control or we are responsible for. in our entire lifetime, if you can really narrow it down to those 4 things. So it's your thinking, your emoting, your languaging, and your behaving. And coaching really is about supporting the client to get vulnerable, understand that changing and shifting internal aspects, the thinking and emoting side, can really change the way they show up in the world. And because I work with lots of leadership, I think that supporting leadership, but also challenging them to keep promises to themselves, goals and desires that they have wanted to possibly reach during this lifetime, during their role. So the challenge part is to basically get them to keep those promises to themselves and find that they are actually leading self first before anything. So it's a very supportive and challenging approach, I would say.
Thank you, Zarina, for that introduction. I'm going to ask the same question to Richard. So Richard, what is your kind of coaching that you do, and what is your approach to coaching?
Yeah, thanks. It's a cool question. So I'm going to kind of mix them all up a little bit, true to my own form. I can see Narieta rolling her eyes already. So for me, I have a master's degree in leadership, and I'm also an ICF coach. So I coach over a very wide spectrum. I studied a 2-year postgraduate diploma in ontology, which is a study of a person's way of being. So what I tend to do in terms of my approach to coaching and what kind of coaching I do, I intertwine my learning and my experiences from my ontology diploma, my corporate career, and my academic career, and I kind of use my own life experience to bring that forward. So just to explain a little bit, because people get a bit confused by the terminology of ontology. What ontology means is that I, as an ontological coach, study a person's way of being, which means that I observe how a person shows up in the world and for themselves and what's going on for them and to the world, meaning how they project themselves in the world. So the discipline of ontology is really becoming a very keen observer of a very specific trifactor, which is your language, your emotions, and your body. And these things are intertwined. They cannot be separated. So the way that we use our language and generate distinctions for ourselves is how we create what we term our own reality. So our reality is not the world's reality. It's actually based on our own assessments and perceptions of the world. And how we use language to create those assessments will create a host of emotional reactions and mood states for us. And that impacts on our nervous system. So that's in the body. So there's a very neurobiological impact that's going on in our language. And together, the way that we use that trifactor, the language and emotions and a body, determine what actually becomes possible for us in this world. And therefore, that determines how we show up to the world. So, for example, to put it into very layman practical terms, for today's talk, I could have very easily came to a bunch of assessments and stories in my language about this is going to be a crazy, stressful experience. I really don't want to be doing this. I've got other stuff going on, and etc., etc. That's going to create an emotional state for me. And the feelings of, or the emotions of the, I don't want to do this, is going to create a feeling of dread or anxiety. And my body, in relation to that neurobiological state, my body is going to be tensed, shut down, closed off, etc. And that's going to really determine the possibility of the success that I feel is possible for me. And that all just really lies in my interpretations and what I feel is my ability to deal with it. So my approach to coaching is very much being the observer and inviting the coachee to take part of that process, where we start to observe how they are actually showing up to the world, not necessarily how the world shows up to them. Thanks.
Richard, that's fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. And just before I introduce Karen and ask her the same question, I think the participants in the audience can immediately see that what we're doing is to demonstrate also that there are different perspectives and approaches, and potentially also a threat when it comes to coaching. So Karen, you've got exactly the same question. What kind of coaching do you do, and what is your approach to coaching?
Thank you very much. I'm also going to approach this in a slightly different way. I'd like to just give you some context on my background. So my academic background is in psychology and marketing, and I own and run 2 businesses, Go Forward, which is a PR and stakeholder communications agency, and Self-Actualize, which is a coaching agency or consultancy, for want of a better word. But my career path really started in research and moved into managing businesses, marketing and communication strategy, with a few very, very wonderful years in education and training. So coaching is actually a relatively new addition to my service offering. The latter part of my career has been dominated by advisory, consultative, and more mentoring, and coaching was very much a natural progression for me. So perception coaching is my sweet spot, very much focusing on self-awareness for organizations and individuals. And there really are 2 areas of coaching that I specialize in. One is what I like to call conscious brand coaching, which is very much a strategy coaching approach. And here I like to use a suite of perception-based assessments and tools. I love data. I love data as a starting point, and it's very, very rich territory to initiate a coaching journey. And I like to help organizations shift consciousness amongst their leadership and team. So what I'm essentially doing here is assessing an organization's cohesion and alignment to purpose. So, you know, a conscious brand supports positive impact. So for people, organizations, and the planet, and it's all about building trust authentically. It's all about higher purpose, values, and actions. And my coaching approach focuses on supporting organizations, big and your SMEs. And you know, I want them to uncover a deeper expression and understanding of their business's higher purpose and values. And this really goes a long way towards increasing organizational transparency and building trust with stakeholders. And that's a good sweet spot for me because PR is a perception game, and you know, the 2 marry very nicely together. And ultimately, it's about encouraging a new mindset and understanding within a business. So I basically coach businesses to do better business on purpose. And on the other side, I also offer coaching to working moms. This is a very specialized niche, many of whom are either small business owners or essentially contributing to what are, you know, our growing gig economy. And this niche, there really is a limited access to ongoing professional and personal development. And I like to support and coach my clients to reach their potential. And this really is, you know, inputs to refocusing their energy, and very much guiding their personal and professional journeys. My approach, again, makes use of perception-based tools and assessments as a starting point. And from there, I like to offer either customized individual or a group coaching. I hope that's answered your question.
Perfect. Yes. Thank you, Karen. Now that we've got a good understanding of what your approach is, what kind of coaching you do, what area you work in, the next question, and I'm going to start with Richard on this one, is linking a little bit more with your client audience. And I think it's important for people to understand what kind of clients you work with, what kind of audience you engage in, and what particularly are their core needs. Richard?
Cool, thank you. So, you know, with ontology, that's not necessarily a very specific, it's quite wide. So I coach from corps, like I've coached at Alan Gray, to MDs, to housewives, to teenagers. And the reason why is because we all, as human beings, experience various breakdowns, whether it is with teams at work or at home with the family. And it's important for us to understand that breakdowns occur for us in any level, you know, whether it's on a deep personal issue or whether it is working with teams and top management. And a breakdown is basically kind of a bottleneck in processing things. So organizations, teams, and individuals can very quickly and easily get trapped in their breakdowns. And as I said, what a company or a person deems as possible or not is really depending on what's going on for them. So we cannot excuse ourselves when we go to work. We cannot leave ourselves behind when we meet friends. We bring ourselves to life in every single situation. You know, I've walked and worked in corporate and top management positions for 20 years. And sorry, guys who are listening, I'm just very honest and open and transparent. So just excuse me if it shocks you, whatever. You know, I've walked an incredible journey in addiction recovery towards sobriety. And I had to deal with reestablishing my own personal brand. So my combination, you know, of my experiences, both professionally and personally, over life spectrum has really provided an incredible insight into all the various factors and spectrums of life. So, you know, whether it is in addiction recovery that I coach in, or whether there is a breakdown with a board of directors, you know, I feel, and I have been very effective in both, because again, we are dealing with each other, we're dealing with ourselves, we're dealing with people. So it's also this, like, as I was saying, it extends to corporate. I mean, especially in the areas of management structure. And what I find a lot is issues with corporate culture. I'm often asked to step in. And I think one thing that really pisses top management off is that, why is it that this corporate culture is not clicking? But organizations need to actually understand that people are asked to ascribe to a corporate culture. However, as individuals, you know, as all of us, we all have our own culture. And what we actually do is we bring our own culture, our set of beliefs and ways of doing things into work. And top management just kind of expect us to disregard that and ascribe to a new one, and they cannot understand. And that's why you'll find a lot of top management, when you go for consults, they say, create a Google for us, let's be Apple. And I'm like, okay, cool, that's great. I'm not Harry Potter, number one. And number two, we've also got to understand that as individuals, we bring ourselves forward. So I feel, in my experience, that the core needs around people looking for coaching and organizations is that people have an intrinsic need to feel validated and legitimized for their struggles. Really, to actually knock it all down to the very base, people want to be listened to. And in my experience, I feel that when people feel they are truly listened to and legitimized, their voice is legitimized, they are able to bring an incredible amount of openness and willingness to shift. But it all starts with that. It starts in the languaging, because listening is a language. And it's about allowing ourselves to allow other people to step forward too, and not be this dogmatic structure in every aspect of our life. It's becoming pliable, willing, listen, and listening to ourselves.
Richard, thank you very much for that. And it's always powerful when your own story becomes part of what and the reasons why you do what you do. So thank you for sharing that, Richard. And then Zarina, the same question to you. You've kind of introduced your audience in the beginning, but let's also talk a little bit more about your kinds of clients that you have, or the audience that you have, and their core needs.
Thank you, Narieta. The main client audience that I have focused on is high-level leadership, and it's exactly for the same reasons that Richard mentioned. Because at the end of the day, leadership is the area of highest influence, whether we like it or not. If you can really support leadership to start doing their best and leading their best leadership styles in an organization, it is where you would find the quicker and the broader impact. So my audience tends to be leadership in organizations, and sometimes it's teams, because it's teams of leaders, depending on the size of the organization. Sometimes you're sitting with a whole management team who in turn then has an influence on the teams below. So coaching, I believe, is really about changing the world one conversation at a time. And if you could speak to individuals that have broader reach and higher impact, and at their core, they are there to influence. If you can directly support and challenge those individuals, then, you know, I like to believe that we are really changing the world quicker, because it's having a ripple knock-on effect with the rest of the people that they in turn influence. So getting leadership right is really key in any system, in any organization. And so that really tends to be the core focus. The things that they need primarily are, like I mentioned before, coaching being, and meta coaching specifically being about thinking about your thinking, is that sometimes leaders really need to start looking at themselves. And coaching tends to be a way of holding a mirror up. And again, it's in a very gentle, supportive way, because you want to support that individual, understanding that no human is infallible. We take that individual and support them to experience themselves as leaders. And I think it speaks to what Richard was saying as well, because it then automatically influences the culture, etc. So an experienced coach will support and challenge you to do this. Leaders also need to consistently grow. I mean, we operate in an ever-changing environment. In a VUCA world, there's no constant. We need to understand how we do things. Leaders need to know how they do things. Sometimes they're standing in their own way, and they might be influencing things in a way that goes against their goals and desires for that organization. And so to just kind of create a consciousness around that is very supportive to the whole organization. So you basically, I target the key individuals to have a wider and greater impact. Also, a leader needs to have mental fitness, this agility of the mind, to be able to flex and go with the ebb and flow of the ever-changing system. And when you're in your day-to-day operations, or you're in your strategy, you're not strategizing about how you strategize. And so coaching does that for you. It brings that to light for you. It makes you more grounded in the way you approach even creating strategic plans. And with this changing environment, it's not just the usual changes. It's the critical mass that's now being created by new generations. It is dealing with the impact of a global pandemic on your organization, and the very special and specific needs that arise in your organization due to this global pandemic. So the leader needs to be equipped, supported, up to date, ready, confident. And sometimes, as we know, leadership is a lonely place. And the irony is the leader sometimes needs to just feel that they are on the right path and on the right track. And coaching is not a modality where we transfer knowledge or mentor or give advice, but we actually draw out what's already there. And leaders sometimes are so layered because of all the years of experience, all the different things that they've had to go through to reach the space that they're in, that they've forgotten what their real purpose was or is. And it's just there. It's underneath all of the layers, and it's about supporting them to kind of peel away the layers, reconnect with themselves, and be more authentic. And that creates that consciousness around leadership. And consciousness is unlimited, it's infinite. So as you go through a coaching process, you're like, aha, oh, you see things that you didn't see before. And then as you know better, you do better. And then that process is reiterated, you do that again and again, and it's just creating more consciousness. And ultimately, I think it speaks to what Richard was saying in the way we interact as human beings, being conscious of ourselves, our impact, our and our thinking, our feeling, our behaving, our languaging can make all the difference towards success for the individual and for the organization. And so that's where the key needs lie for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Zarina. I really appreciate that feedback. And then Karen, let's hear from you. So what are your main client audience base, and then what are their core needs?
Yes, thank you. So I essentially focus on two core client audiences, the one being organizations and businesses that really have a legitimate desire to have a sustainable business impact. So meaning they thrive in harmony with society and obviously the environment in which they operate. And the other audience, which is really quite different, is working women and women that are really seeking transformative growth, I would say, in both their professional and personal roles. For the sake of time, I think I'm only going to speak to the conscious brands and their organizational coaching needs. Otherwise, I'm going to keep you here all day. So here, my audience tends to be ESG managers, leaders, department heads in HR and marketing. A great example of a client is Danone Southern Africa, a B Corp accredited organization that really is looking to translate global purpose to local impact. And many businesses in Southern Africa that have a sort of global counterparts are looking to do just that, but are ill-equipped to manage that journey, and coaching can become incredibly valuable as part of that process. So, you know, more than ever, it's not just companies and organizations, it's consumers, it's employees and organizations and leaders, and they're making decisions based on trust. And you know, environmental, social, and governance principles, whether it's climate change or diversity and inclusion, are fundamentally critical elements that we need to address, and that coaching can effectively address. So my clients are businesses that are really on a journey to becoming more conscious, and you know, to be more effective, they need to take steps to change their cultures, and certainly to embed purpose right into the center of their DNA. So this can only happen if there is a cycle of strategic action and continuous collaborative learning over time on the part of all of the stakeholders, every single one of the stakeholders within an organization. So their core need for coaching support is to assist in developing a pathway towards this. So, you know, it's along with transparency, awareness, accountability, and for me, again, data measurement. So there's specific markers we like to measure and help shift through coaching. This would be things like understanding higher purpose, you know, developing your purpose-driven strategies. It's all about developing agility and responsiveness, you know, and as Zarina pointed to, you know, this sort of layered leadership, it's critically important that there is this agility and responsiveness to the marketplace. And to the nuances of the local market conditions. And that leads into conscious communication and making sure that staff are intrinsically engaged with the organization. And on the other side of it, it's about empathetically connected customers, and that's a lot for an organization to deal with. So for me, coaching here and the needs of the organization, it's about helping leaders and organizations find their blind spots between purpose and action. It's also playing in the dissonance space between leadership and the dissonance that might exist between leadership and staff or employees. It's about coaching the highly aligned employees, you know, the ones that are super motivated to activate others, and to understand why employees that are not aligned, why they are demotivated. And this creates a groundswell of improvement and new perspective that the organization can improve. So I'm probably going over time here, but you know, we're building individual insights. We're creating a positive group dynamics. We're inviting inclusion and getting employees to be part of co-creating their journey within the organization. It's a lot about accountability, something that Zarina also mentioned. You know, a larger group aligned to the goals of the organizational purpose. And it's very much about a paradigm shift and a new mindset. And that starts with self-awareness. And sometimes businesses don't always know that they have that need, but it really is a good place to start, and coaching can assist with building that consciousness overall.
Karen, I think then sits the magic formula. We don't always realize or think that we need it, but it's the awareness and the willingness towards that level of transformation. I love the idea also that you mentioned about the co-creation, so that you're part of it. The next round of questions, each speaker is going to get a unique question I'd like to ask them. Zarina, we're going to start with you. How would an individual, manager, or company know that it is time to consider coaching? And what is your advice on what kind or ways of coaching they should consider?
Thank you. That's a fantastic question in a very pragmatic way. And Narieta, I just want to take this opportunity to say, like Karen was saying, we as coaches probably need much more airtime. And so we really appreciate that you've you know, given some time from the school to dedicate to an industry that's very relevant now and very valuable. And like Karen was saying, you know, sometimes we don't even know that we need something. And just having conversations like this can slowly expose what the real objectives are of coaching. And I hope that it does support some people to find out more. And really, I think coaches would love to talk more about this. So maybe you could have a round 2 for us at some point. But to come back to your question, how would an individual, manager, or company know that it is time to consider coaching? I believe that an individual, manager, or company would know it's time to consider coaching when they may be experiencing a sense of stuckness. So, like Karen was saying, we don't know sometimes what we need, but there's this sensation that you're going around in circles, or your mind is operating in a cyclic way. And sometimes, as wise older people, we think, gosh, I've been wanting to do this, whatever it is, since like 1995, and here I am still thinking about when will I start. When will I do that? When will I integrate this new system into my organization? When will I create this in the culture? We've got a lot of wants and needs and desires, but the when doesn't kind of present itself. And so we've got that cyclic feeling. We're going around and around in our head. And that sensation, when you're feeling that sensation for absolutely anything, personal or professional, that is the time to call a coach. So that stuckness is definitely the sense. And this sense is not necessarily a negative sense. Sometimes it's a feeling of having the capacity to do more, feeling like there's potential. You've got this kind of potential untapped sitting inside yourself, or sitting inside your organization, or you recognize it in your team, and it needs direction and it needs a catalyst. And what comes to mind is Marianne Williamson's quote that Madiba used in his inauguration speech. And I think it was, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure, and that it's our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. And when that sense, when you're feeling that, that's probably a great time to contact a coach, because that means there's more. There's more, and as human beings, we're very aware that we've got limited time on this planet. We've got, time is not exactly always working with us. Most of the time, it's working against us, more so now than ever. And so, calling in a coach when you've got that sensation means getting the support to fast track you towards the things that you'd like your light to shine on, or what you'd like to discover and uncover about this one life and that one organization and that one community of people that you've got working. I think that's the time to consider calling in a coach. I hope that helps.
Very much. Thank you, Zarina. And it linked quite nicely with what Karen also said. So speaking of Karen, I think this one is for you. Yes, it's your turn again. Karen, how will you know if you or your organization or brand are fulfilling your or their purpose, be that life, work, or business impact?
This is a really, really great question, and thank you for it. And I'm going to segue straight back to what Zarina said in order to put it into context. A really, really good place to start here is how you will know that you are not fulfilling your purpose. And Zarina put it just perfectly when she referred to it as that sense of stuckness. So in a personal capacity, or in my personal capacity perhaps, fully fulfilling one's purpose means you are in a state of flow, not stuckness. So for me, one of the key elements of a flourishing, fulfilling life is a sense of purpose that allows us to find our passions, definitely pursuing really important goals. And for me, it's also about authenticity and whether you're ultimately living a life where you are authentically happy. So most of us go about our lives without even actively thinking about what purpose we are trying to accomplish. And often purpose, and I think Zarina also alluded to this, lies underneath things. So it's already there. It's often a case of rediscovering or connecting with your purpose. And I could spend hours telling you all about my personal journey. There has very much been that way for me over the last 2 years. And it's finding your way back from that stuckness. So, we derive purposefulness really from the various roles we play in our lives, whether it's work, personal relationships, parenting. I mean, I think a number of the hats that I have to wear on a daily basis, from mother of a teenage son and a tween to a wife, to a business owner, to a business partner. You know, there's a lot of complexity in those roles we play, but the degree to which we feel our contribution in that role is meaningful essentially will have a positive or negative impact on our overall perception of purpose. So what you believe about yourself and what you believe is possible for yourself really affects how you show up every day, so that you're achieving and aligning towards your purpose. For an organizational brand, having a higher purpose is the why. It's the Simon Sinek why. But in my case, it's beyond just profits. And this drives innovation and customer loyalty and differentiation, all those lovely good things, employee morale, productivity, I can go on and on. But you will know an organization is on track with regards to purpose if they become more awake, more aware, more intentional in their leadership, in their culture, in their strategies, their policies and marketing and communication. So basically all the inputs that are key to making a positive impact. And for me, fulfilling purpose means a company knows why they exist beyond the money, making stakeholders feel something, inspiring their people and stakeholders to be part of the change. So really harnessing a shared purpose applies to organizations, something that connects people, something that unifies people, something that really mobilizes people around a common goal. And I hope that's making sense. But this is the real foundation for change. It's clarity on who you are as an organization, your higher purpose, and fundamentally why that matters to people. And it's in there that provides the meaningful direction. You know, that's the magic sauce. And the end result really is a more memorable, a more trusted organization that is intentionally doing great things in the world. So I suppose to summarize, it's purpose on purpose. I hope that's answered your question, and I've gone over, sorry.
No, it's perfect, absolutely perfect. And I think what is lovely about the conversation is we're shifting perspective a little bit between the personal and the organizational, the brand versus the people making up the brand. The next question for Richard is bringing it back a little bit to the personal then. So Richard, from your side, what do you advise clients on personal growth, transformation, and personal evolution?
Sure, thank you. I love this question. So I'm going to put a question out to everybody else listening, and I want you guys to think about it for a second. Ask yourself one question, like, what are your options here? Because in my experience, there's nothing more painful than staying stuck. So when it comes to the options over here, we find that our attitudes and our languaging around, okay, well, it's actually not scary to change and experience personal growth and transformation. It is not just an idea, it is more than a possibility. And if anything, I am living proof of it. So first of all, to start the process, recognize that you are a learner in this world and become willing to learn. For me, as an advice that I'd give everybody, if you want to start the process, it's important to become an astute observer of yourself and observe how you show up in the world. And when you're alone by yourself, spend some time checking in with yourself. I mean, we don't do this. I understand life is busy and things overcome us and we've got distractions. Maybe it's work, it's kids, it's emails, etc. But the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one with yourself. And as individuals, it also seems to be the one that we neglect the most. So check in with yourselves and look at how you are showing up. And remember that the world doesn't happen to you. You happen to the world. So we do this through our interpretations and the stories that we live in and out of. And all the stories that we have in our lives, and there are hundreds of them going on in your life currently. Think about your stories going on with friends, with work, with colleagues, with your parents, your children, whatever, your past, your future. There are hundreds of stories that you are living in and out of. And in all your stories, there is going to be a villain and there's going to be a victor. So ask yourself, where is the truth? Where is the fact? Where is the fiction? Because if you do not find indisputable fact that your story is correct, then it's time to question its validity. Most of us get trapped in these things. So become an astute observer of your languaging around your experiences and your expectations. If you want to start this journey, watch your languaging and those assessments. Watch them very, very closely. If you want to experience growth and transformation, you need to question your current interpretations, because we tend to trust the voice that goes on in our minds the most, but we ignore that it is also the one that lies to us the most. When I think of the stories that I have lived in my life and believed they were true, and the emotional states and the mood and the actual impact it's had on my body with stress, with nausea, headaches, inability to sleep, weight loss, etc., it is insane. It is insane. And how is it when we get to a certain stage and we look back at our lives and we're like, oh shit, man, come on, it was so obvious. It's because we've learned, we've experienced, and we are able to reflect with that learning. So what are we ignoring now? If you want to start growing, start listening to your listening. And what I'd also say is watch your expectations of others, and most importantly, yourself, guys. Self-compassion and self-love, all those wonderful things that we think that we are desperate to get. It lies in the way that we interpret our expectations. Remember one thing, that expectations are birthing resentments. So when you live in a world of right and wrong and yes and no and good and bad, and everything is on a scale of 0 to 100, where 100 is successful and 0 is a failure, well, then you've got nothing left to learn if you're at 100. And I don't want to be in a world where I can't learn, because judging on my past experiences, if I continue to live in 100 was my knowledge back then versus my interpretation of it now, reflecting back, I actually look like a bit of an idiot. So I have learned that that is what I need to do. Listen to my listening, listen to the expectations, allow myself the space. And you have to realize that coaching and life and everything is about a process. It is an evolution. Be patient with yourself. We live in a world of instant gratification with immediate solutions. Guys, whether it is being able to bloody well pick up your phone and WhatsApp somebody and get an immediate answer. Yes, they've read my message. Shit, they're not replying. I guess what? What story am I living in? Why not? Etc. The caterpillar goes through the process to be a moth and a butterfly. It doesn't just suddenly lay an egg and in 2 seconds you turn around, there's this magnificent creature in front of you. We are so impatient with ourselves. And it is so vitally important, in order to harness the strength of personal growth and transformation and evolution, to remember that that is exactly what it is. It is growth, and growth can sometimes be painful, but we all know that growth comes from experience, and growth is something that we look back at and we look, cheap as I've got far. Look at me. I've grown, I've moved. We have that ability. Look in and listen to your listening. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. We've got 3 more questions, and then we're going to get the audience to ask their questions that they'd like to ask. Next up, Serena, your question is, how can one go about creating a strategic development plan for inclusion management? And how do you make the team feel more involved and accountable?
Wonderful. I love irony. And the irony of this question is that if you're inclusive about how you go about doing the development plan, you're already demonstrating inclusion to the rest of your people. And by demonstrating inclusion to your people, you automatically trigger accountability. So in a practical sense, how I would recommend going about doing this, obviously it depends on your organization size and your industry to a certain extent. But I would imagine that the investment of time and actual inclusion in the process of developing the plan would be a key to rolling out a wonderful inclusion management across your organization that would very much become part of your culture. So when you are creating the plan, that's the time to put in all your eggs. And what I would do in a practical sense is, create, if you can imagine creating a team or focus groups of representatives from different levels, different departments across the organization to all come together in a process that could be very much managed by a coach, which means the leader then becomes just another team player and doesn't have to wear the hat of being the leader or a non-neutral party. He or she could become just a part of that process, and you could have this third party neutral person with the experience and the core skills that will support the process. And so bringing in those people to focus groups and really listening, deeply listening to what their experience or their need for inclusion is on the ground, what their unique definitions of inclusion is in their space, in the landscape that they operate in on a daily basis. Really collecting and collating and giving feedback, and really it's about practicing your core coaching skills, which is your deep listening and your non-judgmental approach, just collecting all of that wonderful information on what they believe, what they really believe inclusion is, beyond compliance and regulatory definitions of inclusion, really the human element, and taking that, translating that into something very practical. You could end up with a document of what inclusion means and how we do inclusion in our organization that could then after be rolled out by champions that you would select. But it really starting with the people, and that in itself is inclusion. And when you don't have inclusion, you limit your organization, you limit the thinking, you limit the behaving, you limit the languaging, you limit the emotions that come through your organization, because you haven't provided a space where people can belong and feel safe and express their uniqueness and their diversity. And it's that magic that lies in the uniqueness and the diversity of every single individual in your organization that can bring so much innovation if they feel free to express and take risks and make mistakes and just put all their stuff out there. I mean, performance goes through the roof, productivity goes through the roof. So it's really a very important value to hold in an organization. But more importantly, it is something that needs to be practiced. And coaching is really about translating wonderful concepts and theories into practical living behaviors, because we coaching the human mind to now integrate new behaving into organizations. So a value like inclusion is wonderful if it's in your report or in your desk drawer or up on the wall, but if it's not practiced, it's really lost completely. You've really missed an opportunity. So coaching is about translating things into very practical, and that's why it ties up well with cultures in organization and creating cultures, because you're coaching the thinking and emoting, but it's translating into the behaving and the languaging. And so behaving and speaking inclusion is more important than just thinking about inclusion. And a coach could support the leader to translate from I want inclusion, I think we need inclusion, I believe in inclusion, I value inclusion, to this is how we do inclusion. And then I think it's just automatic that your team would feel more involved and accountable if you've done that whole process in itself as an inclusive process. Hope that helps.
Brilliant. Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Zarina. Karen, your question is, what is the best way to coach a small business team? And are small businesses open to coaching? And if not, why not?
Thank you very much for this question, and it's very close to my heart given that I've been a small business owner on a number of occasions. I think perhaps a good place to start here is to define what small means. And in South African terms, that really is an organization with between 10 and 50 employees. So that's a good benchmark for you to consider when we unpack this question. In small businesses, people really work together as a team, and they work with each other on a much more personal level. So things like healthy relationships, respect, inclusion, conflict management, problem-solving abilities, these are all really critically important for success when you're in a small business space. So I would say that coaching a small business, you need to coach as a cohesive team. That's the best approach. One where we don't isolate individuals, but rather look to try and promote that lovely alignment and collective growth and performance as a team. So it's about optimizing the team. So small teams really perform best when, as Zarina pointed out, there is an inclusive and collaborative environment. And that means, in my mind, that an individual's worth is valued, and that their unique contribution to that small business team is also valued by everybody. So I guess it's a similar approach to a sports coach. We've just had a recent experience where my son plays provincial hockey, and he's had access to some incredible sports coach, and they managed to harness the power of every individual member of that hockey team, accessing unique strengths and combining them to ensure that there's an elevated level of performance on the field. And it's been incredible to witness the growth of the team since the start of the season until now. And I think that mirrors a lot of what's going on inside a small business ecosystem. To answer the second part of that question, I think many small businesses are very open to coaching, but there are definitely some perceived barriers to entry. So this could often be around affordability, or the perceived, lack of accessibility, or sometimes a lack of clarity about what type of coaching they might actually need. And we are facing some particularly financially testing times. I think there are very few small businesses that have not really had to roll up their sleeves and get into the trenches. And I think small business owners might think that hiring a business coaching service has no place on their list of priorities and pain points that they currently have. So commonly, businesses that have not found a business coach or a mentor really haven't done so because they believe it's a costly relationship that they can't afford. And small business owners are also driven by their vision, right? It's got them working their tail off to keep that ship afloat and on course. And I think a lot of us do it with a combination of intuition and good old management hacking. So we know intuitively what's best for the business. It is a product of our vision after all. But that said, I think many also understand that the whole go it alone attitude isn't actually always best for business. So I think you get entrepreneurs and small business owners that take one look at that coaching fee and they cringe. Their gut reaction is just sort of, okay, I'm going to hunker down. I'm going to solve this problem all by myself, just like I've done it so many other times before for other areas of my business. And I suppose as an entrepreneur or small business owner, you started off as a specialist. You have a great idea for a business. You launched it. You're kind of then stuck with the job of a generalist. And this can work for quite a while. And you'll soon realize that you don't have time to stay on top of all of the things that you need to do, or the challenges become too complex for your experience. So you have a choice here. You can continue to hack it, or you can get some help. And coaches really can provide that help. And I think the most important thing and thought to leave you with here is that there really is a very big need in South Africa to promote both, greater awareness and accessibility at scale for micro and small businesses, just to accelerate and promote the health of the organization, and especially where conscious branding is concerned. If you teach them those principles and you steer the entire organization towards that higher purpose, you really, from the start, and they can access the wealth that the coaches, it really does accelerate growth and purpose-led growth.
Thank you, Karen. I think the one thing that stood out there for me especially is the, you talk about the scalability of accessibility. So I think that's why, and it may have been in our previous conversation that we privately had, is also why you tend to also focus more on the team and not just individual when it comes to coaching, because then it makes it also more accessible. Richard, I've got one more question for you. And I'm going to say, I know it's a big question, and I know there's going to be an amazing story, but you've got 2 minutes to respond to it. So there's it's your challenge, Richard. How has coaching?
Shit, man.
Because I would like to give the participants a chance to ask a question or two. So
sure.
off you go.
Well, look, at the end of the day, I've just become a very astute observer of how I show up. I spent the majority of my life being at odds with the world and myself. I lived with like a kind of a deep, satisfied dissatisfaction, and I felt like I was chewing a piece of bubble gum that had lost its flavor. Look, as I said, I've lived as a functioning drug addict, and in that process, I say functioning because I headed up some of the largest accounts in this country. I had also headed up strategy for a 2 billion rand firm. But at the end of the day, let's not pass judgment too quickly, because we are all addicted to something, because addiction is about behavior, not substance. So it left me shattered inside, and I had to start from the ground up and rediscover Richard. Coaching provided me with tools that no treatment center, psychologist, or another master's degree could ever. And the whole thing about having to shift my language, and it opened up a world of potential and possibility to me that I never thought was possible. I mean, if you go into exclusive books and even look on your own bookshelf, and yes, I've read all the books that you've read and bought, and they all promise personal growth and development. And at the end of reading them, you're like, okay, and now what do I do? At the end of the day, and coaching brought me that incredible understanding and the ability to start actually putting into practice what those books had once promised me. It became real. So now, through coaching, how it's benefited me, I understand Richard, I understand how he operates, and I'm able to put this into everyday practice, and my life is completely transformed. I mean, up until 5 years ago, I was a hopeless drug addict that had absolutely no hope of ever getting clean or ever being a useful member of society. And now when I look at how my life has completely transformed to a person I only dared to dream was possible, it's amazing. And the greatest gift that coaching has ever given me, and which something I'm so honored to share on a daily basis, and the gratitude is incredible, is that I'm able to share these learnings with other people, and the honor of watching it shift in my clients' lives is, I cannot begin to describe to you the actual honor that I feel to enjoy this life, and the gratitude that I have to be a part of it. Thank you.
Richard, thank you. And that one line that you said is that coaching gave you the tools to rediscover. And I think the magic with coaching in general is that we have the resources. It's helping us to know that we have the resources available and the tools just to help ourselves facilitate through the process of decision making and realization and finding our feet and finding our direction. So the audience, you now have the opportunity. I would allow 2 questions, just considering our time, and there was quickly a hand that went up. So I'm going to give Sangwani, and I hope I'm saying your name correctly. I'm going to change your settings. Sangwani, you can now unmute and you can ask your question to the panel. Okay, let's see if you can find the mic button at the bottom of the screen. If you would like to ask a question, there you go. Yes, we can hear you. Go for it.
Cool. No, hi guys, thanks. Lovely talks and all of that. I'm gonna try to keep it short. Basically, I run a small agency. We're doing 360. The strategy that we're using in terms of being able to have resources to help us out with the work is a freelance umbrella strategy, because right now we can't really afford to put the whole team on a permanent basis. So time to time, there are people who are, I feel like they are my A team. They're always hungry, doing their best. And then there's the ones who kind of drop the ball. And it becomes a bit frustrating when we try our best to incentivize. Sometimes we tick them out or whatever going on. But there's just a lack of synergy that I feel like, and so I wanted to be part of the session where we are trying to solve as the guys who are running the day-to-day business side of things. How do we motivate these people or kind of unlock them to see themselves more than just someone who's coming through to help out on the work, but so that we are growing something together. By the time we're able to grow and we're able to put them on a permanent basis or more lucrative salaries, then like those whole numbers are just speaking to the efforts that they are putting. So this way my struggle is. And then I also like what Karen was talking about in terms of like the affordability for small businesses. This is quite a thing for us. So I don't know if there is like cheaper, affordable, or I don't know, or way that we can work out like how we can approach those payments. I'd also like to have that information, please.
Great. I see Karen is keen to take that one. So Karen, you can go ahead. And thank you for the question. Karen, over to you.
Yes, hi Angwani. I hear you. As a small business, there are definitely some tension points that you know you need to deal with, and a lack of synergy is often one of those. I think perhaps Serena's best pitch to speak about how to change the dynamic, but I would just like to speak about affordability, and it's something that's very close to my heart. There are many accessible tools out there that are both affordable and very, very useful to an organization. One of the things and challenges that you seem to have is about aligning sort of your organizational purpose and vision with some of those individuals that are not leaning in, and that are not perceived to be contributing according to your expectations, and that really is a lovely space to play, and it's often about shifting perceptions, which is where I find my sweet spot. So that perception, it's not black and white. A perception is something that can be shifted and shaped, and can have a lot of value. And here, you as a business owner can almost become certified in a perception management tool, and you can then enable and unlock some of the potential within your own business. And I've found in smaller businesses, smaller interventions, getting the organization aligned to what they want to achieve, their on purpose, their on strategy, who are the brand believers or the organizational believers and who are not, and the interventions there. There are definitely tools that you can access that are affordable and incredibly useful to you as a business owner. Serena, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Thank you, Karen. I think you touched on what I would have added, and that's about really, understanding those people that may be feeling stuck and checking in on their purpose. What do they want for their lives, and what are their needs? And trying to align that with what the organization actually is achieving as well, so that they feel an attachment to the organizational purpose, which is key to motivation.
Brilliant, thank you. I think we can allow one more question. So if there's anybody in the audience that would like to ask another question, and we'll keep it nice and brief and to the point, just raise your hand and I will change the settings on my side. Okay. I don't see any hands being raised, so that suggests that there are no more questions from the panel. So to conclude the discussion, I'm going to ask that our panel members share with me in a short 1 minute, what is the closing thought you want to share with your audience today? So Richard, let's start with you. What's your closing thought?
Thank you. Yeah, I just want you guys to take away that wherever you go, there you are. So you can never escape yourself. And trust me, I've tried that. Ultimately, you end up at the same place and you will face yourself. So there's absolutely no shame, but it's more personal responsibility that should drive you towards reaching out for a coach. Remember that you are not a human being. You are a human becoming. So show yourself some compassion. It's a foreign feeling for a lot of us. So yeah, guys, check out my website. I've got a YouTube series on self-authorship. Watch some of those videos. It will kick you off on that journey. And remember, it is never too late or too soon to reach out and grab some assistance. Thank you very much for having me today. It was such an honor to be with you.
It's been great. Thanks, Richard. Lovely closing thought there. And Zarina, closing thought for the day?
Thank you. Yes, I love what Richard says, like wherever you go, there you are. So I'd like to challenge the audience to, in their human becoming, to experience really what is going on for them at all times. Become conscious of yourself. Observe your thinking, your emotions, your behaving, and your languaging. Really observe yourself, because that's the work that we've got to all do in this world, is to refine ourselves towards our purpose and live our best lives in that way. And observing your thinking, your emotions, your behaving, and your languaging is the start point to everything. And that at the end is all you are responsible for. So I would like to challenge the audience to take that on. Feel free to also connect on LinkedIn if there's any further questions and specifics that the audience might like to ask. So I'll put myself out there, because like I said earlier, coaching does certainly need more airtime. It is a wonderful modality to really creating not just conscious individuals, but conscious organizations, and really a conscious planet ultimately. So thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Zarina. And then Karen, your closing thought.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'd like to just take a moment to consider what trust means. And trust fuels our ability to cope with psychological stress and well-being. And I think that is tantamount to what we've been experiencing for quite some time. So with the huge pressures in life that we have now, whether they're societal or organizational, team, personal, we really do need to foster relationships built on trust and empathy. And but the business environment is competitive and pressurized and can lead to some very, very negative interpersonal dynamics. And we can't underestimate the power and impact of relationships that are built on trust and empathy. And businesses now more than ever, and individuals now more than ever, need to be grounded in active listening and taking care of employees' psychological strength and well-being. So when you pause just for a moment from the busyness that so many of us find ourselves in, think about the bigger picture and who we need to be as leaders, as individuals. And an important missing part of that puzzle can be making space for coaching, whether that's finding it for ourselves, or perhaps choosing to be someone who steps into the need to coach and mentor others, or in my case, ideally making space for both. And thank you very much for having me, and I look forward to connecting with you on LinkedIn as well.
It's been an absolute, the pleasure is all mine and ours here at Vega School for having the three of you involved in the discussion today. We're putting the recording out on our website, so it's there to live and to engage with further. What I would love to touch base on just from a closing point of view is a few really key things that stood out from today. Is one of the keywords I've written down here is the very idea of perception. To show up, to be aware of our own language and our thinking and our behavior. We are what we think, be that what we think of ourselves or of others, and how we create that perception. And I think that's very empowering to think that we can shift a perception. So thank you for the three of you for joining us today, and everybody else that dialed in today. It's been a great pleasure having you. And have a wonderful rest of your Friday. And thank you once again. Thanks, everybody. Do take care.